welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live video series. And joining me today to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced him the most on his life path is astrologer, psychic, multi-medium, tarot scholar, musician, prolific author, and cat butler. And we'll find out a bit more about that one later. Monte Farber, whose books and oracles, 3 million in print in 18 languages, I might add, have helped millions answer questions, find deeper meaning, and follow their spiritual paths. And his best-selling books, well, we certainly couldn't list them all, but they include the Enchanted Tarot, the Karma Cards, the Creativity Oracle, the Enchanted Love Tarot, Quantum Affirmations, Chakra Meditation Kit, and the list goes on and on. And if you spend any time in crystal stores or in the mind, body, spirit aisle of a good bookstore, you will see this name over and over again. Monte Farber, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Sandie, I tell you, this show is so important in the sense that I'm sure you've sent everyone like me down memory lane to, you know, I just turned 71 on the 22nd of January, and I was 14 again, just thinking about the first book on this list. So you're a time traveler.
Wow. You know, that's wonderful to hear. And I have people say, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. It'd take me too long. And afterwards, they always say, wow, that was a fantastic experience. So
yes,
I'm glad that you got to enjoy it.
It is an experience. I would have to say it's not just, oh, I'm going to be interviewed. It's literally it's an experience akin to writing a book, actually.
Yeah. You know, I tell people, of all the different shows I've hosted and all the interviews I've done, there's something about this one that is just so much more fun, so much more enjoyable, so intimate, so cozy, and just, you know, relaxed.
Well, I don't know, because it took me through the time that I was homeless. So yeah, no, so it's been a very emotional experience, you know, because the first book on my list is the Bible. And the reason it's on my list, you know, I was raised in a Jewish family, but it was the Bible was taught in my high school to the honor English classes. And I got into honor English because for some reason I had a past life experience. The English part of the exam, you had to get in with a test to Brooklyn Technical High School, was you had to answer these questions based on a text that was legal English. And I read it as if I was reading the newspaper. And I got into honor English. So that was my first past lifetime experience, first of all. And I had other experiences in my high school that changed my life. And then we read the Bible as a secular book. And that really came into play when I got to be friends with Zecharia Sitchin, which is one of the other books further down the line. Because reading the Bible was quite interesting. Reading it as a history book or as a secular book or as a psychology book. I don't think you could do that today, at least in America. They probably would throw my teacher out of the building.
So tell me why it had such an impact on you. What was it about the Bible?
Well, we were reading it as a history book. We weren't, no one was pushing an agenda. And I found it fascinating. First of all, I like the way it was written. You know, I'm a big fan of God as an author. And
Best-selling one.
Yeah, the best-selling book and all. But I think having the distance on it, you know, because most people are introduced to the Bible in a church or in synagogue or whatever you want to call it. But to actually read it as a book was fascinating, you know, because there was a time when they thought a lot of the things in the Bible or in Greek mythology were mythology, but then they found that such places existed. So, you know, as archaeology progressed, they found that there was truth in it. And when I read Zecharia Sitchin's book, Genesis Revisited, I happen to have all the books. Thanks to my lovely wife, Amy Zerner, I have all the books here. I actually got to be friends with Zecharia Sitchin, and this book had a profound effect on me. And one of the reasons I got to be so close to him was I understood the Bible really well. And he was a linguistic scholar who could read the cuneiforms And he had what I like to call the unified field theory of humanity's origins based on the Sumerian cuneiforms. And so he actually asked Amy, who's the artist who did the piece behind me. She's a fabric collage artist who does all the illustrations for my work. She asked Amy and I, because he knew that Amy did work the way the Sumerians did. There was wisdom in the art. That's where art comes from. It was a way to convey information to people that couldn't read. There's a lot of theories about the tarot because of that. And he asked us to do the children's book version of his work. So
and you did?
Well, I can do it. We've never came to an agreement with his publisher, but I could do it now that he's gone. Unfortunately, I mean, I could certainly do it and just attribute it to him because the ideas are his. But the Bible informed my understanding of his work because the Bible is actually derivative of the Sumerian creation myth. So and it says in the Bible, I mean, one of the things it says is Abraham's father was a priest of Ur. Ur was one of the main cities of Samaria. And so, the Jewish Hebrew calendar dates from when the first visitations from the planet Nibiru. I mean, once you start talking about this, it spins off into the land of speculation. But as somebody who I know it really well, so I could talk about it like a story, which is why he wanted us to do it. And I said to him, if I was going to do it, I would do it like Planet of the Apes. He said, that's my favorite movie.
So how did you meet him?
That's a really good question. I think I'm not a joiner, but for some reason I went to his lectures. I actually traveled to the Yucatan with him when they had something called the Prophets Conference.
I remember.
And I don't know if remember back then? And it was the first time that the Mayans, the Mexican government allowed the Mayans to do Mayan rituals at the Mayan shrines. And because my father was a police sergeant and I was used to the smell of guns oil, from the cleaning of the guns, I said to Mayan elder Hunbot's men, I said, why are there so many police around here? He says, I don't see any police. I say, I smell them. And the Mexican police had sent the state police in plain clothes to watch him do rituals at Chichen Itza. I guess they're worried about revolutions. But they were so far from that, you couldn't be any further from it. They're peaceful, wonderful, the real deal in terms of magic. But that was the Prophets Conference. It was him. It was Edgar Mitchell. It was Drumvalo Melchizedek. It was quite an interesting group. And but because Zecharia lived in New York and I live out on the Long Island, on the end of Long Island, which is sort of the end, 100 miles from New York City. And we got to be friends. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. What was he like?
Crusty. He's very well. People are always ripping off his work, and they would equate it with like David Icke's and the lizard people, and that really pissed him off because he was a scholar, and he had fans of his work in the Vatican. He had scientists. In 1979, in the 12th planet, he predicted that Uranus and Neptune would look exactly very similar, and that wasn't confirmed until the flyby, I think, in 1979. He was just quoted. He said he never claimed to be original. He did do some noveling, but he always said it was like what they say in the Sumerian text: everything I know, the gods told us. With a small g, everybody, don't want to get anybody upset, but they considered these people from this planet that came. Whatever the year of the Jewish calendar is now, that date, according to him, is the date that the leader of this planet made his earthly visit to try and put down the rebellion of the gold miners. It's very interesting. It's a lot of fun.
Very interesting. It is very interesting, yeah. And there was a time when people used to raise their eyebrows when you mentioned him.
I was one of them.
Yeah. And what are they saying now? Just across the news today, I saw something about some scholar who was saying, well, I think it's pretty true that we came from Mars.
Well, yes. And some other theories from Zecharia Sitchin's work were that not from his translations, was that the moon had been formed from Earth. And there's a lot of people that say that the moon has been formed from Earth as a terraformed. And then what is Bill Gates trying to do now that everybody's up in arms? He wants to suspend particles in the atmosphere to cool down the atmosphere or warm the atmosphere. I don't even know which one. But according to Zecharia, the Sumerians said that on this planet that comes back every 3,600 years called Nibiru, they were going to suspend gold particles in the atmosphere. That's why they came to Earth to mine gold. They were going to suspend gold particles because when they went out, spun into space, they would lose their atmosphere. And apparently Mars had an atmosphere enough to support life until one of the closest passes and it took the atmosphere. It's totally fascinating. Whether it's true or not, I can't prove it because I can't read the cuneiforms. But to me, it explained all the monumental buildings, the stone buildings around the world, because they had to build them out of stone because they'd come back every 3,600 years and what would still be there except things that were made out of stone. And plus it explains places like Baalbek in Lebanon, which has these blocks of stone that are 150,000 tons, which we could not do today if we wanted to. Yeah. And it explains all these other places, like in South America, there are these walls that have survived earthquakes that are built like we couldn't build today. You can't even get a knife into between the two big stones that are on weird angles. Yeah, there's just a lot of crazy stuff. And gold is still our commodity. You know, it was like a spiritual, space-oriented Goldfinger. They loved only gold, you know, like the song.
I mean, it is fascinating, and we could do a whole show just about this.
Easily can. But I just wanted to show that when you read a book, it's not just the book. The book sends these webs out and these ripples into the future, and you connect with them at later times of your day. I mean, we're talking about the ones that really matter to us, like I have Be Here Now. You know, Ram Dass just passed away. And as you can see from this one, it looks like somebody carried it around with them and walked around when they were homeless. And I carried this around and walked around with it when I was homeless. And it really had a lot of meaning to me. And that's another book that rippled into my future. I never thought I'd be an author. I never thought I'd be known for philosophy of any kind, you know, let alone philosophy of what I'm known for.
Well, I mean, I've got a list and it is in a particular order, and we don't have to keep to that order. Let's talk about Ram Dass, but before we do, I want to know, how did you walk onto this path?
Strangely enough, once again, in Brooklyn Technical High School, when I thought I was going to be an engineer, because I found out I was too tall to be a jet pilot, and I didn't want to do medical stuff because I wouldn't experiment on animals. They said if you took the I forget one of the science courses, you had to kill a frog, and I wasn't going to kill some frog just because some 14-year-old idiot wants to learn. So I did the college prep course, and I was in the gym class with a teacher who was really mean, but he was 67 years old, and they couldn't throw him out because he was healthier than anybody in the school. And he ate sprouts that he grew himself. But these were in the days before eating that way meant you were a spiritual, nice person. I mean, he was nasty. And one day I was malingering about my back, and and I went to a school with 6,000 boys. It's Brooklyn Technical High School. Can you imagine? 6,000 idiots in one school, that the auditorium was 3,000 seats, second largest auditorium only to Radio City Music Hall in the city of New York. But it was very interesting. And he called me out in front of all the other malingerers and said, "Hey, Farber, I can fix your back, but it'll hurt." So I said, "Okay. What am I supposed to say? It's all boys, all nasty boys just like me." And he takes his thumbs and jams them into my arches as hard as he can. And he could do more push-ups than any person in the school. And he says, "Touch your toes." I went right down and came right back up. And I was like, "What is that?" He says, "That's reflexology." And I decided to find out about it. And that really started me on my journey, that there's more to this world than you think. If someone can squeeze your arches and cure your back, that just showed me that there are connections that I had no idea about.
So that sent you on a path of exploration.
It really did. And I think it might have led me to that. And I guess the first I was a musician, and my friend and I used to play. I was pretty good at one point. This was after homelessness, and I had a place, and I was loading trucks or something. But I played in a band at night. We played 12-string guitars at a place called Annam Brahma, which is a Indian food restaurant owned by Sri Chinmoy's disciples in New York City and Queens. And John McLaughlin, the guitarist, would play there, and Carlos Santana would play there. And we were good. And I asked one of the men there that I respected, and they all wore white. They were just I'm not a joiner, like I said, so I was never a disciple. I said, what's a good book for me to read that'll help me understand? And he said, Autobiography of a Yogi. He says it started a lot of us here on our path. So I read it, and I loved it. I actually loved it. I dedicated a closet of my house to doing Kriya Yoga. And once again, I think about some of the things Yogananda said almost every day, especially when you're an author, because he said the time of defeat is the best time to plant the seeds of success. And you get a lot of rejections when you're, yeah. And as I tell budding authors, I say, listen, think about it. Think of the equation. You're going to be rejected until you're accepted. There's no other way around it. So, and this is the best time to plant the seeds. Yeah, and he said a lot of other things too. He said the truth is not afraid of questions. That was his teacher, Sri Chinmoy, told him that. And I think about that now during cancel culture. All these people who are afraid of questions. You can't say this, you can't say that. Yeah. And that really annoys me, because the truth is not afraid of questions. If you know what you're talking about, you shouldn't care if somebody doesn't believe the same way you do. So what that, once again, it's these books send ripples into the future, and every once in a while you catch up with them.
Yeah. I mean, this is a book that appears again and again on people's
I'm sure.
lists. Yeah.
Yeah.
And understandably, you know, that's the thing I like about truth, because, you know, it's irrefutable and everybody feels it.
Yes, especially that book, because, you know, they called him an incarnation of love, and you can feel the love coming out of that book. And he was so powerful that actually the Three Stooges imitated him. I don't know if you've ever watched the Three Stooges, but there's a Three Stooges episode where they dress Curly up like this, and they talk to him and they go maha, and he goes aha, and it's all a takeoff, because he was the first guru to come from India to try and sort of bring those. And you know, Time magazine said that when he died, his body did not decompose, and that was proven. At the time, you could trust Time magazine, so people did, so. But I sort of veered off that path when I read this one, The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts, because here's something that's written by a disembodied spirit, and it's a channeled book. And not being a joiner, I never went up to Elmira, which is a 2-hour bus ride from New York City, or 3 hours. But I was fascinated by it. And shortly thereafter, reading that book, I met Amy. That changed my life more than all the books, but it all came together.
So what did you think of that book when you were introduced to the whole idea of, you know, people being able to channel, you know, beings that had no bodies? Was that a big shock to you?
Well, I think as a musician and smoking marijuana, nothing was a big shock to. I was more of a shock to other people than. But I'll tell you one thing. I was on my way to this is what you used to do back then. I was on my way to a Halloween party in Vermont where I knew no one. I had been somehow invited, and the bus ride was long, and I think I read the first page. I would read like one sentence of that book, and then, you know, it's like you create your own reality. That's all you need to understand this book, or to write your own. I think that's the first sentence. I still remember it. I have issues with you create your own reality, because some people are born into bodies that have problems. So I don't think they created that, and I don't think people should feel guilty about it. But it was enough to jar me out of my whatever. And I have been very lucky where I've been able to recognize the truth when I hear it. And I found a lot of truth in that book.
So when you met Amy, was it Amy who kind of prodded you further along this path?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think we prodded each other. You know, we met in 1974, you know, as when dinosaurs ruled the earth. and we met at the filming of a porno movie, so that'll give you some idea of the varied nature of. I was playing music in a band that got hired to do a rooftop party scene. There, everyone had their clothes on, but everybody in my band was playing like this, trying to see if there was anybody around that was doing anything. I'm trying to think about, because once we got into books, we got into writing them, and
well, how did that come about?
Well, when I met Amy, she was studying astrology and I was studying Amy, so I learned astrology. And then we live out here. Amy grew up in the Hamptons. She moved here when she was 16. And I used to do astrology at parties for people, just, to keep from being bored. And they said one day, well, it would be so great to be able to do this when you're not around. Okay. I guess I took it as a compliment, I guess, because as an Aquarius, you don't realize they're saying, we don't really want to need you. So I invented something called karma cards. And in 1986, I was walking around the book fair in New Orleans, and I sold it to a British company called Edison Sod Editions, who had done the Rune Stones, the Book of Runes with Ralph Blum.
Yeah.
And they did Liz Green's tarot, the Mythic Tarot. And I said to them, I had it on file cards, and I said, I have this astrology card game. It tells the future. He said, let's play it. So we played it. We got a great answer. I said, what'd you ask? He said, I asked if we should publish it. And that was one of the few times when you actually did get it on the first shot. And at the same moment I was selling that, Amy was introducing her tapestry work to Stuart Kaplan, who unfortunately just passed away about a week ago, the head of US Game Systems, who does all the tarot publishing. He's sort of like the godfather of tarot. And he said, this is great. You should do like the tarot of of the goddesses of St. Petersburg of Russia or so. And so that's what got Amy into eventually doing the Enchanted Tarot.
So did the astrology come first before the tarot?
Yeah. Well, we knew them both. The astrology came first. Amy had been taught astrology by her roommate in college, a man named Rupert Smith, who went on to print all of the posters for Andy Warhol. He had a company called Rack and Roll, and he was a wonderful guy. He unfortunately passed away from AIDS. I remember staying at his house. He had a whole building in Tribeca in New York City, and it was called Rack and Roll. And I slept next to the Marilyn when they were making the Marilyn, when they were doing the the silkscreen pulls. It was very exciting. It was an exciting time.
It sounds it. I mean, I said in the newsletter that I sent out that you've lived a life less ordinary. I mean, it's even less ordinary now that I'm hearing all this.
Yes. Well, Amy and I, we always joke around that we stand at the doorway of history. It sort of like goes by us. We're not necessarily in it, but, I did get to meet Andy Warhol a few times and go to Studio 54 and things like that because of Rupert.
So it's a bit like Forrest Gump. Then he was
very
there,
much so.
All those moments in history.
Yeah, we're like Forrest Gump and Zelig. Remember Woody Allen did Zelig, where he matted himself into all these photographs. That was no, but now we're sort of creating our own stuff, which is good. Our own ripples in time. But it's nice to feel that you. And the books definitely prepared me for all these things, because they sort of chip away the parts of you that you're not so sure of. If you allow yourself to resonate with the work of great people and people who've thought about something. That's why books are so powerful. I told you before, I'm coming to you behind this tapestry of Amy's, is our library. We still love books. We make books. We love books. We love the feel of books. Kindle is fine. We sell a lot of money on Kindle, fine, but we like books.
Yeah. Well, there's something about books. There's so much more than they appear to be. And there's something about words too.
Yeah. And plus there's something about the time involved to make one. Yeah. Like we have 3 books coming out this year. We've been working on it since before the pandemic, but it certainly enabled us. The pandemic certainly took away a lot of distractions. Yeah. And that's actually one of the weirdest things, is that how not different our life has been, in the sense of we're always working on stuff. We don't like to really travel, because when you work on a book, You know, people say, how do you do all those books? I say, remember that time you asked me to go someplace? I said, no, that's how I do all those books. Because when you're concentrating on something, you just can't at least me as an Aquarius, you know, our train of thought can easily jump the tracks. So we need to be very focused.
Yeah.
So,
how many projects, books, decks, whatever, have you actually produced?
Over 50.
Wow.
Yeah. And like I said, we have 3 coming out, including a book about Amy's art. We had a cover meeting about that today. And as you well know, I once had a friend who's no longer a friend who said to me, I'd love to be an author like you. You bang out some pages and they send you a check. And it ain't so simple. Let's put it that way. It's not, you know, and we sell our own books. We started with Edison Sod. We did in 1988, Karma Cards came out the same year that Nancy Reagan was found to use an astrologer. So the first printing on Penguin books went from 15,000, which is tremendous compared to today anyway, to 45,000 as the first printing because of that. And then we did the Enchanted Tarot. And then after that, because we were able to meet the publishers because of Edison Sod, for the third one, we started packaging books ourselves. And we started with St. Martin's Press, who had done the Enchanted Tarot. And now it's with Quarto, which is a British company. Yeah, I think they're all British companies now because you guys just bought Barnes & Noble.
Did we?
Yes, you did. I think it's Waterstones.
Yes, Waterstone. I'm really pleased about that.
So am I,
because we want to take away your bookstore, but it's nice to see, you know, a company actually doing well. I mean,
oh yeah,
you know, after Amazon has ridden roughshod over everybody.
No, I'm telling you, well, we're very pleased about it, and the people that work there, because they were trying to sell Barnes & Noble for quite some time, and to have it go to an actual book company is a joy, and especially a British one, but that's successful.
It's a beautiful book chain. It really is. It's a joy to go into those bookstores.
Well, and we have high hopes for them, and we wrote to them sending them an astrology proposal. And they said, well, we overpublished astrology, but your name came up with our new publisher because you were a successful backlist title. You know, Karma Cards have been in continuous print since 1988. And they said, and our sales department wants you to do something else. So I was like, wow, they're calling me for a change. I love this new publisher. This publisher is like my best friend ever. So we submitted the proposal. And for all you budding authors out there, that's what you do. Get your proposal together. And if you're not lucky enough to know the publishers like we do, get an agent, because they don't want to deal with an author usually.
No, normally they don't. But you do get the odd one that somehow breaks through.
Yeah, I mean, Amy and I are living proof that, you know, sometimes the exception to the rule does happen.
Yeah. So let's move on to Edgar Cayce.
Oh my God, Edgar Cayce. Well, now we move into my college days. I actually left college because of Edgar Cayce, because I thought the earth changes were coming. And I would imagine that if the guidance counselor I talked to is still alive, he's still dining out on that story, because I came to him, I said, well, you know, the earth changes, we're talking about the 60s, 70s, right? The early, no, we're talking about the 60s. Yeah, because I was born in 1950. So maybe this is 67, 68.
This particular book was published in 71, Jess Stern's book. But of course, there was information around about Edgar Cayce before that.
The Sleeping Prophet, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you're probably right. But I was in college. I must have read something else about it. Another book, because this does say first printing. Well, the second printing. No, this says second printing 67.
Oh, wow. Then Reads is wrong.
Yeah. No, because that's about, I think I read it when it first came out, and I was convinced that this guy was right. And it turns out that I have a very similar astrology chart to him, and I do psychic work now after writing all these books has made me a bit psychic, more than a bit. And he's also a Leo rising. We have some similarities in our charts, and he's figured prominently in my life. I mean, I don't hold it against him that the earth changes didn't happen. I'm kind of glad. But I'll tell you, if you ever see that Mount Pele in Martinique, and then Vesuvius goes, get out of California, because that's the sequence that he talked about. It hasn't happened yet. It might not happen, because I think the spirituality of the 60s prevented a lot of things that could have happened.
Well, this is, you know, something that I've heard before. I mean, there was a time when they were talking about California falling into the sea, and you might as well go and buy some, you know, oceanfront property in Arizona.
Yeah,
And that
for
didn't
sure.
happen. And I
No,
heard from a number of quarters that we had actually changed that.
I think it's totally possible, but I just wanted, I wanted to give all your watchers the you heard it first here. In case you see Mount Pelee and Vesuvius, get out of Dodge. Or at least that's what Edgar Casey said.
So what did you, what was it particularly about that book that really grabbed your interest? Was it the fact that he could do what he did?
Well, I like, to tell you the truth, I have my son in the 6th house, which for all your astrologer friends out there, that I'm into health, service, use of the body. I have been eating naturally since I'm 16. And so I'm 71, I'm healthy, I don't take medicine. And it's a blessing, of course, and I realize I'm lucky and I'm fortunate, but at the same time, I loved his health information. It was just very powerful. And of course, we're not presenting anything as fact or as health information here, in case any attorneys are watching.
I remember reading about almonds in that book.
Yes, about cancer.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I started eating almonds every day. There's so many things that I think he talked about that I adopted.
Well, it reinforced the somatic connection to the body that Mr. Healthand, the nasty vegetarian, had started with me in high school, because he talked a lot about food. And as I'm always reminding my friends who are doctors, the first rule according to Hippocrates was, thy food shall be thy remedy. And yet they only give doctors a week, if that, of nutrition. Yeah. Which is insanity. And Hippocrates also said you couldn't diagnose anyone without knowing their astrology chart, but that's another thing for another day. But I think the thing that got me into Edgar Casey, I love the Atlantis stuff, of course, because it's futuristic. But I love the health, and he did a lot of things about stretching. One thing that he has done that seems to have helped us, he said anyone over 30 years old should invert. And he said these things in trance. It's not that he said, when he was awake, he was a photographer who smoked a lot of cigarettes. But in trance, he said that anyone who's over 30 years old should invert once a day to back flush their lymph system. And I've met so many people who've had cancer, and a lot of it comes into the lymphs. And he said the lymphs were like a V, and you needed to invert to make that whatever is sediment or whatever is blocking that V out of there. So we have this little arch table, which I think is now called a back bridge, and we do it every day. And you know, it's like hard to know if it works. It's like we could have been doing an incantation every day. We wouldn't know if it works. No. As long as we're alive, it seems like it's working. Yeah. So the books are exciting, and books are time capsules, time machines. They're so powerful.
Well, talking about backs and inverting, you've got a book,
yes,
Mind Over Back Pain by John Sarno, on your list.
I do. I don't. Well, I had tremendous back pain that prevented me from working without pain. I don't have it because I gave it away. I also give away a lot of the Zecharia Sitchin books. I buy a case of them and give them away. But I gave that book away because other people. I worked with the Teamsters in the movie business. You know, I was a location manager, and I was working on the movie of A Chorus Line that was directed by Sir Richard Attenborough. And he used to come in every day, and I've always worn hats sort of like this, and he would come in every day and give me a full British salute. That was pretty funny. You know, and he would say he was very funny. But that for some reason, sitting there or doing all this work gave me back pain, and someone suggested Mind Over Back Pain by Dr. Sarno, and the night of the rap party, my back completely collapsed. I didn't think I could do the work, And then I remembered what he said, that he called it the ulcer of the 80s. This was the 80s, it was 1985, that the back is connected to support issues, metaphysical, again, once again, the somatic connection that had started with reflexology. So I was more open to it. I said, this is obviously because I'm out of work. And that's the way it is in the movie business. You work for 5. We were the only ones working the winter of 85 in the Mark Hellinger Theater in New York City, making a chorus line. And I had no job lined up. So I there you go. No support, no money, no nothing. No. And I said, this is ridiculous. And I just got up and and all of a sudden it went away. And I realized that there was truth to that. So I started giving away the book, which is why I don't have it. Yeah, it's a good book. And it turns out Howard Stern, who's not my favorite person in the whole world, he's a disc jockey that's sort of a shock jock.
Shock jock, yeah.
He has gone to Dr. Sarno to get rid of his compulsions, apparently. Someone told me that when I told him about the back book. So he has celebrity endorsements now.
Wow. So mind over matter.
100%. 100%. I mean, I actually wrote a book called Quantum Affirmations about, I looked around one day, I said, how did I go from being homeless to having this wonderful relationship? We've been together 46 years and we live in a nice place and our bills are paid and we're relatively healthy and we do work that we love. How did it happen? And I came up with this mind over quantum physics. I started thinking of consciousness as the smallest particle, because quantum physics is all about very small particles. And then I realized there was a logic to applying quantum physics work to consciousness building and create the reality you wanted to do. I think that's the one book I don't have here is my own. But Quantum Affirmations has helped a lot of people. We have a free Facebook group for people who don't feel like buying the book. But it's all the summation of everything I've read, what works, what doesn't work, because not everything works, of course.
But intention is a very powerful thing.
It is. It is. Well, in quantum physics, they postulate probable futures. And they say that time is not linear. It doesn't necessarily flow only forward. And all these amazing concepts. And as Niels Bohr, who is one of the originators of quantum physics with Einstein, he said, if you don't think quantum physics, to paraphrase, if you don't think quantum physics is really weird, you don't understand it. And because there's something called quantum entanglement that Einstein proved mathematically, and he said that he called it spooky action at a distance. And it got him out of quantum physics. He didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore, because he said God does not play dice with the universe. And then I think Niels Bohr said to him, who are you to say what God does? Or words to that effect. So once again, books, because when we think about all the things we've read, and it's like having being a fly on the wall to all these privileged conversations. It's wonderful.
Well, it just opens doorways to so much, doesn't it?
If those who have ears, let them hear. Going back to the Bible, right? Yeah. None so blind as those who will not see.
Will not see, yeah, for sure.
See, that the Bible comes in there, it gets in there,
There's truth in there.
Yeah, no, 100%. If you're open, you got to be open, though.
Yeah. So the next book is Alan Watts, The Wisdom of Insecurity, a message for an age of anxiety.
Oh my God, The Wisdom of Insecurity is such
now.
Yeah, I need it now too, and I couldn't find it. I mean, we must have it someplace we put things in special places, also known as the places you never see things again. But that's a very important book to us, the Wisdom of Insecurity, because in this day and age, with nothing being secure, and you can't trust the news, because one day it's masks, and the next day it's don't wear masks, and the next day it's wear 3 masks. Yeah, you have to listen to your intuition, the quiet voice inside us that's always talking. But you got to listen, and that's what Amy and I have devoted our lives to doing. I mean, she's an amazing artist, and one of the books that's coming out this year is Enchanted World, which is about her art, and she's been a fashion designer for Bergdorf Goodman in New York City for 20-something years, and her jewelry. But our books are all about getting in touch with the power that's within you. It's the magic's not in the cards or whatever. It's in you. It's getting it out of you.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So that particular book, do you remember when you read it?
I think it's shortly after we met. You asked that question, and I think we discovered Alan Watts, and we actually knew someone who knew him well. Um, he was an artist, and of course, I can't remember his name right now, but I can see his art. He did negative space work. He had a series of tapes that he made with Alan Watts, and I remember him playing them for us. Ibram Lassow, I think. Yeah, Amy just nodded. Yeah, Ibram Lassow. And we went to his house and we told him how much we liked that book. For some reason, it just came up in conversation. He was in his 80s even at that time. And he said, "You like Alan Watts?" He was a good friend of mine. And he had a whole stack of tapes. They were neatly arranged in a rack. And he says, he took out him talking about the wisdom of insecurity. So that was a seminal moment right there as well, to hear it in his own voice. I mean, it was a cassette. So that sort of dates when it was made.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once again, we stand at the doorway of history.
Yeah. When God Was a Woman, Merlin Stone.
Yes. Well, yeah. I've always been a feminist. Always. I had a sister and I had a mother. My aunt was very lovely to me, saved my life, I'd like to think. And ever since I was 6 years old, when I stopped a man from beating his wife on the street, and my father, who was a policeman, stopped the man from beating me. It's a long story, but he's like, you can't do stuff like, my father told me, you can't do stuff like this. But my father really straightened him out, because in those days, in 1956, the police in New York City, you didn't want to mess with them. But I've always realized that women were getting a bad deal, and it just made no sense, because I mean, once again, for your astrologers, I have Mars in Libra, and Neptune in Libra is the hippie generation, because the slow-moving planets are in this. They stamp out generations. Libra is all about balance, harmony, and it just seems like, well, this is unfair. And then you'd also hear, as a boy, you'd hear boys talking about girls, and then you'd see the way they were with the girls, the lying snakes that they were, and I just didn't like it at all. So I've always been a feminist. And after we did the Enchanted Tarot, we did the Alchemist, which we had to change the name because Coelho did the Alchemist. But
Yes.
and then we did something called Goddess Guide Me, because Simon and Schuster wanted something from us, and as you know, if Simon and Schuster wants something from you, you do it. And I read that book for background, but it was just incredible. You just kept reading and reading. We made something called Goddess Guide Me, and I'm very proud of it. And it's 12. Amy did 12 different goddess tapestries. It's like that game of exquisite cadavers where everyone draws a head, and everyone draws a middle, and everyone draws a bottom, and then you put them all together. So she did tapestries that divided in three. And it's a flip page book on a wire row bound, and you roll dice to find out which number of which goddess you're going to get the head, the heart, and the home. And it was pretty amazing. And we talked about the goddess with a capital G. And we were very proud to do it. And Dr. Gimbutas at the time had done her book. And Clara Piccola Estes, I actually got to introduce her at a conference in Colorado. And so anything that I could do and that Amy could do to advance the cause of women, we've always been there. I've been writing S/HE since the 80s, because when I would, in Goddess Guide Me, in the introduction, I use the feminine pronoun, she instead of he, because it used to annoy me when they'd use he for humanity. Or a man this and a man that. So it's just, we're trying to rebalance that. And that's why that book was so important to me, because sometimes people, why are they going to listen to me? But they might listen to someone like the author of that book. And Clara Piccola Estes and Dr. Gimbutas was a respected archaeologist till she opened up her mouth about Western Europe or Eastern Europe, European cultures where God was a woman.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, everybody had a problem with her. Before that, she was completely, a respected person. And once again, it's all done through books, which is why your show is so powerful.
So Constructive Living by David Reynolds, published in 1984. I don't know that one.
It's worth reading. You obviously don't need it, but for people, it's a great book to give someone who's complaining about something, because it basically, it's like the old Jackie Vernon. Oh, no, there's Henny Youngman. It's, doc, it hurts when I do this, and the doctor says, so don't do this. It's basically stop complaining and do something. And it comes out of Japan. The actual constructive living concept comes out of Japan, but he did the translation and some embellishment. It really is the way Amy and I live. Once again, we rather than complain about stuff, we move on and try and do stuff. It doesn't mention forgiveness, because forgiveness is a really important part of it. It's basically more industrial, more industrious, I should say, not industrial. More like, if you do something, you'll forget about all these things you're complaining about.
Yeah, it reminds me of the book, Why Don't You Yes But? People are always complaining about something, and you say, well, why don't you do this? Well, yes, but.
Yeah. Well, that's the same.
Want to live with the complaining.
Yeah. And no, that's a great book. And there's one that's not even on my list called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. You can't get it for some reason. It's like $80. I have it, but by Thaddeus Golos, The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. It's a very thin book. Someone should republish it, or Amazon or somebody. But that was another influential book, Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment.
Well, let's go back to Ram Dass. That is the last book on the list that I've got. And,
okay.
I've seen, you held up your copy, and I've seen so many copies of that book that look exactly like that. It's so well thumbed.
Yes, it's falling apart.
Yeah.
Well, because it was the kind of thing where you can think about it for quite some time. You could look at one page. It was the right book for the right time. So
when did you come across it?
Early on, shortly after its publication. It's as I said, I was a musician for a while, and so that period, they say if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. Well, I was there. And so I'm sure that shortly after its publication, I got into it. Let's see if it doesn't fall apart what I'm looking for. Now I'm looking for the, oh my God, there's so many stains on this thing. Jesus. It says 1971. So, well, I would be 21 at that time. So I was homeless when I got it. Somehow, I must have got connected to it at that point. Perhaps when we were living in a cabin with no water and electricity and heat up in the Pennsylvania mountains.
So why were you homeless?
My father invited me to leave the house for very stupid. I think I was interfering with his sex life, and it was just me and him. And I think he thought I was having too much fun. And when I left college because of Edgar Cayce, he was like, "Well, I don't have to support you anymore." And but it wasn't. So I ended up sleeping in the park for a little bit, and then I moved in with. Okay, here we go. I moved in with a friend who was a guitarist and was eating macrobiotically, so when he shot heroin, he would get higher. It was that kind of time. And then his other roommate, who was actually paying rent, was a Jamaican drug dealer, and he was killed 2 weeks after I moved out of the house. So it was that was my on the road period, Sandie. It was I learned a lot then, but I think I learned more from the books.
Yeah, so there's a hell of a past here to dig into.
Yeah, but I don't think my life started until I met Amy. So that was 1974.
Before you were just
floating,
jamming around.
Well, my father used to say, "You're floating. You're a floater," and it turns out he was right. I didn't realize it at the time. We get along much better since he's gone to the other side. Actually, I realized what he did for me, and some of the things he said had truth to them. He should have written it into a book. Then I would have had more respect. But one thing's for sure, I never ever thought of myself as a writer, or that I would be a writer. I wrote songs, but I never thought that music to me was a pen with no handle. I just couldn't pick it up. It never really worked. But books open like a flower ever since they started. You know, we've sold things with just like a little plastic hockey puck. Psychic circle, I'll take it. You know, it's that kind of thing.
You describe yourself, when I asked you for keywords, descriptors, multi-medium. What does
Yes.
that mean?
Well, that was Amy's idea, because we do so many things, and you know, just she is an artist. She does art, but she put her art onto the back of fashions. One day, one of Bergdorf's personal shoppers saw her work. Amy had won the National Endowment for the Arts Award. It's a government award that they used to give to artists, and she won a big award. And she was at a party, and she started putting her art on jackets, because she never wanted anyone to sit on her work, because people had asked her for clothing for the longest time. But she just got tired of saying, I do fabric and it's collage and it's this and that. So she put it on a jacket, like the ancient Tibetan Tengo pattern, which you actually can hang on your wall.
Yeah.
And she would go, I do this, and she would turn around. And someone walked up to her and she did that. And the woman said, I can sell this. And Amy walked into Bergdorf Goodman, which, as anyone in fashion knows, is the height of the fashion industry. And they took it on the first shot. Once again, we were very fortunate that way. And she's been there for 23 years. I mean, the store was closed for a while during the pandemic, but it's open and she's selling again. So that's just one example. And she does jewelry as well, but she also does the illustrations for the books. And I do the books, and I also do psychic work, and I do astrology, and then we write books around a whole lot of different things. Plus, I can do plumbing, carpentry, and electricity. So I guess that's where
you've got that to fall back on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if nobody wants the books.
My father would be so proud. That was his whole thing, was, you know, you have to have something to fall back on.
Proper job.
Yeah.
When I read multi-medium, I thought, now what does that mean? Next to psychic and next to astrologer and all of the other, tarot scholar, I thought, I wonder whether he's a medium talking to dead people, but he's doing it in multiple different ways.
I have done it. I can hear. Well, I don't say I can talk to them, because everybody can talk to them. Everyone should talk to the deceased, but I can hear them sometimes, and I see pictures, and I've had enough proof where me, as my Brooklyn Technical High School scientific mind, will say, yeah, there's no other explanation for it. I've heard things from deceased people I had no way of knowing, and that got proved. So I can hear them. And my experience is, like, I believe in UFOs, not just because of Zecharia. I actually saw one when I was 16, walking down the street in Brooklyn with my friend Jay, who later became a pilot in the US Navy, flying admirals around carriers. And we were in uniform. We were joined the Civil Air Patrol. So we were trained observers. It's the civilian auxiliary of the US Air Force. We were trained observers of the trails of airplanes. We knew what they meant. So we would walk down the street on our way to the meeting, looking up at the sky. Oh, that's a 707, because that's all that existed at the time, probably, or that's a fighter, or this. We looked up and something made a right turn, which it doesn't happen. There was a contrail, and I went, and we both screamed in the middle of Church Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, in uniform, and started running. Why we were running, I have no idea, because I guess it scared us. So when people say, well, do you believe in UFOs? I'm like, I think I pretty much saw one, because, nothing makes a right turn. So my experiences with all the different psychic and metaphysical experiences are personal. I don't expect anyone, they have to believe that I'm not lying. I understand that people don't trust people, and I don't think they should. But if you open up to it and you read the right books and watch your show and get all the right book information and be open to it, I think you'll come up with your own philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Which of these books is the closest to your heart?
Oh, that's a hard one. Well, when you say it's I'm looking at Yogananda and Be Here Now. I mean, those are like a friendship. The one I think about a lot is Zechariah's work, because here's somebody who, in my opinion, is like Einstein, and it's not as known as Einstein.
Yeah.
So that's a good reminder to me. Sometimes I wish my work, it's like we've sold a lot of books, but we haven't sold, yes, we've sold books that have sold hundreds of thousands of copies, But I would like, you know how it is. Your reach should always exceed your grasp. So I would like one book to do a little bit better and get, especially quantum affirmations, because it teaches people how to have more in their life. Or our soulmate path. We wrote the soulmate path, which is about our relationship. Because I want everybody to. I don't want to feel guilty about having a great relationship. I want everybody to have a great relationship. So I would like them to do better. And it just reminds me, he did his best. He tried his hardest. He got it out there as best he could. It's in 40 languages or whatever. But he, you know, you say his name, they don't know it the way they know Einstein.
Yeah.
So, and plus, because I knew him personally, I guess that's why it has. You ask good questions; they make me think.
That's good. That's good. So,
Yeah.
what are you reading now?
Wow.
That's exciting you.
Well, I'm reading a lot about astrology because I'm teaching an astrology class. So I'm interested to what other people. Every once in, to tell you the truth, I don't read as much as I should since I've been writing books. But I've been reading about this because I want to see what other people think. And I want to see if because a lot of things that I was taught as an astrologer turned out not to be accurate. So I want to see if there's other people out there that are saying some interesting stuff that can trigger stuff in me. And I'm also reading Ingo Swan's book.
Oh, right.
Yeah, about remote viewing. Because once again, here we go in the doorway of history. We met him. Our friend Dr. Jerry Epstein, who wrote Healing Visualizations and was a genius, he was good friends with him, and we went over to his house, and we got to talk with him. So I pulled that out to read it.
So who do you admire in astrology? Which of the astrologers do you admire most?
Well, Robert Hand, if you're talking about the writers, Pelletier, I don't know if Pelletier is still alive. I have
Liz
some.
Green?
Yeah, definitely. A New Look at an Old Devil is a very important book for people to read about Saturn. I mean, definitely Liz Green. And you know, we ran our friend Sheila Haidt. We have a show on Zoom every Monday called Ask the Oracles, and our friend Sheila Haidt uses Liz Green's tarot deck. It was really, like old home week when we saw it. It was very unexpected. Yes, and in terms of who the astrologers are that I think now are really interesting on Facebook and those, and like now it's not Facebook, now it's Gab, and they're moving off of it because they don't like the cancel culture. But a guy named William Stickover is really good. He's very good about Hori astrology, and also a man named Theodore White. And both of them have impeccable credentials in terms of who they studied with. Because I studied with some people that were really good, but they're not known. They studied with like the brightest lights of Hori astrology. So when they talk, I listen, and they've been very accurate with a lot of predictions, especially about cryptocurrency, which I've learned a lot about from them. And there's plenty of room to go on Bitcoin, according to those guys.
So when you look at your own chart in retrospect, do you see the path all laid out for you?
In retrospect, yes. Before, no. I don't know if well, it's like I tell people all the time, if you look at Amy and my charts, we shouldn't be married to anyone, let alone each other. If you go by traditional astrology. And that's one of the reasons I was saying that I'm reading these books, because a lot of the stuff that we were taught, I think they were winging it when they said some of the stuff, because and also it's a new day. It's a new age. I don't think things mean the same things that they used to.
No. I started studying astrology when I was 27 to disprove it.
Wow.
And I couldn't.
Yeah, you're like the Gauquelins, Michelle and Francois.
Yeah,
because they studied it, and then they were statisticians, and they got into it to disprove it, and then they found all the correlations. My favorite one of their predictions, not predictions, was discoveries, was that in all the people they studied, Jupiter near the angles was in the charts of actors and politicians more than anyone else. I mean, Mars being there for sports champions and generals was not a surprise, but Jupiter was a surprise to me.
Yeah, many people feel that we are at a, we know we're at a turning point, but that this turning point is something that we actually can influence ourselves.
Yes.
By our consciousness. And do you think that the collective consciousness is at a level where it can actually influence it for the better?
I do. And I think that all these patriarchal, you know, everything you need to know, I'll tell you, or I'll lock you all down. I think there's going to be a backlash to it. And I think right now everybody's been forced to be a monk in a cave in the Himalayas, and or the Himalayas, as you say. And
we don't say that. We say Himalayas.
Oh, good. Well, well, you say jaguar instead
Oh,
of.
we do say jaguar. Yeah, and
I
we
was
do
just,
say tomato.
yeah. I just wanted to be au courant. So I do think that everybody here is stewing in our own juices, and it is going to empower people. They just haven't seen where the handle on the pan is yet to grab and how to do it. I mean, right now in America, it's very odd because it's been suggested and to some people proved that the election system is rigged, but I think they'll make changes that will prevent that from happening. Back in the 80s, I wrote a song that I recorded. That's when I was sleeping at Rupert's house, actually. Well, yeah, one of the times, called Saturn Transit, which is in astrology is about between 27 and 32 years when Saturn comes back to where it was when you're born. And it was about the 3 decades. And I predicted that people were one day going to vote using the phone and the television. I thought I didn't. There was no internet, and I think eventually they're going to get some kind of way, you know, with blockchain technology, which they use for storing Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. There's going to be a way to vote without fraud using blockchain technology. I hope, and I think that there will go from being representative democracies to more direct democracy, which I'm sure will horrify the people at Davos and you know the World Economic Summit and all, and which I think is going to be in Singapore, not at Davos. Yeah, but I think the people, because this is the Aquarian age. The Aquarian age is humanity. It's like the old Snoopy Peanuts cartoon. It's like we love humanity. It's people we can't stand. You know, but we're in the Aquarius Leo polarity. Aquarius is humanity. Leo is the individual, the ego. So it's every person a king or a queen. Every you know it's everybody is a star should be the theme song. And that's really, you know, like Andy Warhol said, in the future everyone's going to be famous for 15 minutes. Here I am. I'm on your show. I'm famous for 15 minutes, a little longer, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're almost at the end now. I have to ask you about the cat butler.
Well, we have a 20-year-old cat named Zane. And if anybody's watching and has it in gallery view, Amy, is he by you? Can you hold him up? Because Amy's no, he's over there sleeping on one of his many thrones. And so at 20 years, we've been very good to him, but we want him to stay as long as possible. He's born on Amy's birthday, March 23rd. So we're and we cater to him like we should all live like this cat. And his daily meal is basically another cat's last meal request on death row. You know, it's like you can have anything you want. Another cat would look at what he rejects and say, "You really are crazy," and he is. He's crazy, and he goes out in the rain. That's his favorite thing is when it's raining to go out to get soaking wet, like you dumped him in a bucket of water. Come in, make everything wet. You chase him with a towel, and he goes right out again. So we have this crazy cat. His name is Zane, and eventually I'm going to do a book about him. But I have a superstition about it. I've had the idea for the book for about 10 years, but I won't do it because I'm afraid he'll die if I do it. So that's all my vaunted knowledge has not prevented me from being superstitious about my cat.
Well, you know, the thing about our pets is, which one of us is the pet? I often think, you know, we're opening the doors for the dogs. We're, you know,
yeah,
they rule the roost.
Yeah, I guess that's it. I'm more like a sled dog than like a pet owner. I'm more like hauling his butt around all over the place. And they're a very expensive habit, but worth every penny.
Yeah. Monte, it's been a delight. It's been a fun conversation, and thank you for joining us today. It has been a real treat to speak to you. I can't believe that I've known of you and we've communicated over the past something like 20 years, and this is the first time we've actually looked at one another.
Yes, I was like, oh my God, there she is. This is great. Yeah. Well, now apparently I'm going to go read the chat because that sounds like my kind of chat.
And Joyce says, terrific interview. Monte, you sound better with a British interviewer.
Everybody does.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not the one with the accent. You are.
This is true. Oh, and I could have done it with my Brooklyn accent, from when I grew up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That would have been very odd.
Okay, so tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, it's theenchantedworld.com. If you go there, you can find out about me, about Amy. Or if you want to go specifically to her, it's Amy Zerner, ZERNER.com. Or if you want to go just to my thing, montefarber.com. We keep it simple.
Monty, thank you for being with us. Amy,
our pleasure.
Joining us and keeping an eye on him.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what it would be like to not have her looking over my shoulder. So
yeah, of course. Okay, well, it was wonderful to have your company today, and thank you to everybody at home for joining us as well. If you want to see more of these, just go and sign up on the No BS Spiritual Book Club website, and we'll keep you informed of future guests.
Thank you. I always want to be connected with anything called No BS.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Thank you.